We try to employ as many of the Burgundian techniques, which is basically being light-handed with the Pinot Noir. Here, it's keeping in with a house style and trying to let that oak, trying to let the influence of our winemaking be on the background and let the vineyard side come through. Our winemaking, I don't think, is extremely complicated. I think what we do is very meticulous, but it's not complicated. We don't have a real fancy kind of facility. It doesn't take much to, I think, really make these kind of wines, facility-wise. We bring all the fruit in, hand-picked into quarter-ton picking bins. The fruit is then put into a cold room for 24 hours. We chill it down. The cold room's at 40 degrees. The berries are dumped slowly onto this belt. We can put up to about 8 people up here. Usually we have 4. What the ladies are looking for, or anybody that's doing the sorting, as this fruit's going past you, my rule of thumb is if you don't want to eat it, I don't want to make wine out of it. So you'll even see people tasting berries on fruit that's kind of translucent, not quite purple. If they get a sour taste to it, they'll throw that whole bunch out. We can sort through on really good clean fruit, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 3 tons an hour. So 24, 25 tons is a big day for us. So it's a good 8 hours of sorting. What we would call this is our fermentation pad. And these are old dairy milk tanks that we use to do the fermentations in. We do a 5-day cold soak. So once this stuff is taken off of the stems and it's kind of a solid mass of berries and juice and skins, there's not much convection. So if it's not cold when it's going into the tank, doesn't matter what kind of refrigeration you have on the tank, it's not going to get much colder. The reason we like these dairy milk tanks is that there's a very high skin to juice ratio, meaning that during the fermentation the skins tend to float to the top. And what we have to do is we have to push the skins and reintroduce them into the juice every 6 hours during active fermentation. Well, on these kind of short, squatty tanks, those caps don't get very thick, so they're much easier to punch down. You're not macerating the skins, you're not beating up seeds while you're reintroducing that back into the liquid. Up until about 3 years ago, we were punching these all by hand every 6 hours. And most of my colleagues had been using air devices, pneumatic devices. And I've been looking at them over the years, and I just wasn't convinced that they could do as good a job as a human. After some deep considerations, I decided to go ahead and try one, and we haven't looked back, because by the time you'd punched down your 4th or 5th tank, you were so tired that I had to question, were you really getting the same kind of mix on the 4th tank that you were on the 1st tank? So this gets connected to this stainless steel shaft, and then air is used to push the skins down into the juice. And just by gently pushing this across the cap, we're able to break up the skins. That's where all your flavor, that's where all your tannin, your phenolic compounds are inside the skins. And you want to do this, you want to introduce this into the juice as much as you can during active fermentation. We're very protective winemaking. We use a lot of gas to move the wine out of the barrels. The Pinot Noirs never ever see a pump through the life of the wine all the way to bottling. Everything's done by gravity or by the use of gas. After we've drained the tanks into barrels, we gravity feed into the barrels on the next level down. Then what's left is basically skins and seeds, a little bit of juice. And what we want to do is gently squeeze that out. So we move this little press right up against the tanks, and then somebody gets into the tank with a pair of waders on, fishing waders, and then we bucket it into the tank. Again, we don't pump anything. Most conventional wineries, larger facilities, would use a pump and sluice this into the press. And that's going to cause seeds to break, it's going to cause skins to macerate. So you're going to get some bitterness and some astringency that you wouldn't get by doing it by hand. Once the press is loaded, then we put the doors on, and the cycle I have it set on is so that we basically go up to about 1 atmosphere, which is something like 26 psi. It's a very, very gentle squeezing. It takes about 45 minutes to actually load the press, and then about another 45 minutes to do the pressing itself.
Yeah, smells good.
Then, when the press is done, we take that pumice and we put it out into a manure spreader. And then we spread it back out into the field. So it helps to build up some of the organic material. It's really a great way to kind of give back what the vines have given you at this point. So this is the main barrel room here at Williams Selyem. We use varying amounts of French oak. The primary Cooper, or about 90% of the oak that we use, 95%, is Francois Ferrer. They're in France. We use a Trancé barrel, which is a forest in the center of France. The M plus stands for medium plus. That's the toast level. As they're making the barrel, they actually use a small pot with fire in there to toast the inside. And what that toasting is actually bringing out the wood sugars and caramelizing them to give it some of that flavor in the wine. And then the TH is the toasted heads. So we actually have them toast the inside of the heads, which make up actually about 30% of the surface area in a barrel. So the wines will get drained and pressed directly into a barrel and then inoculated with malolactic culture, and then we'll put them in here. And you'll notice it's kind of warm in here right now. So the malolactic culture likes it, somewhere between about 68 and 72 degrees. So we keep it quite a bit warmer in here than we would normally. Once malolactic has finished, then we'll add a little bit of SO2, top the barrels up, hard bung them, and then take this room down to about 55 degrees. At that point, then the wines will start to settle, and any solids in there, dead yeast cells, dead bacteria cells, will all settle down to the bottom. About March, we'll think about, I'll start pulling samples and I'll start doing blends, and then we'll start selecting, literally with chalk, we'll start selecting barrels that'll go into the Allen vineyard, that'll go into the Rocchioli vineyard, and then we'll start unstacking the barrels and making the blends. Once the blends are made, then they'll go back into this room. It stays again at around 55 degrees, and they'll stay here till they get bottled.